and my letter from the Chamber of Commerce and everyone else expressed some of the things, so it's no different.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. I appreciate your cooperation in that. Your letter is marked supported exhibit number 6 and will be forwarded to the State Liquor Authority. Before I go any further, the gentleman that spoke to me before this hearing, could you come up, please?
Yes, sir.
And I want everybody who is in opposition to listen carefully to what this gentleman has to say. And if you're in agreement with him, I want you to raise your hands. I want the numbers. I want everybody who's taken the time to come here tonight to get their voice heard by the State Liquor Authority, to be recognized, even if only in silence. Numbers speak. The fact that you came here to this hearing tonight shows me that you're interested, shows the State Liquor Authority that you're interested. Sir, I'm going to ask you what your name is and in what capacity you're here.
Your Honor, my name is Gib Bocconi, and I'm here to offer written testimony and a statement on behalf
We're going to start with your name again.
Yes, sir. My name is Gib. It's G-I-B, and my last name is V, as in Victor, E-C-O-N-I.
And you represent?
I'm representing the sponsors of the Brooklyn Speaks Initiative, a coalition of civic and affordable housing and merchant associations in Brooklyn.
And you have written testimony?
Yes, Your Honor.
That you're going to submit, and it's in opposition to closing time?
Yes, it's in opposition to the process and to the closing time. I'm going to paraphrase very, very heavily the testimony because some of it, Your Honor, has heard before, but I'm also going to comment on some information that came out late today that did not have a chance to make it into the testimony that I'm going to submit in writing.
Document in writing is opposition number 8. And do you have a copy for the applicants?
I do not have a copy for the applicants, but I will make sure that they receive one
Okay, now I want you to
tomorrow.
raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that any information you're to present to this tribunal today will be the truth?
I do.
And again, I want everybody who's in opposition to listen very carefully to what this gentleman has to say. And if you agree with him, I want to see your hands. If you agree with him, but you have something entirely different from what he has to say, I'll speak to you briefly. Sir, proceed.
I'm going to present testimony on behalf of the Atlantic Avenue Local Development Corporation, the Boredom Hill Association, the Brooklyn Heights Association, the New York chapter of the Congress of New Urbanism, the Fifth Avenue Committee, the Park Slope Civic Council, the Pratt Area Community Council, and the Prospect Heights Neighborhood Development
They're all
Council.
listed in your written statement.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Our testimony echoes the concern about the closing time of the arena. We note that the arena has been allowed to be sited in its location due to a state override of New York City zoning, and further, the parking lot that's accessory to the arena was allowed to be sited 2 avenues to the east for another override of New York City zoning. So not only is the arena itself in much closer to proximity to residents than would otherwise have been allowed under New York City law, but the parking lot being situated away from the arena requires patrons to travel 2 avenues over through residential streets to reach their cars when exiting the arena. So we believe on that basis and also on the basis of patrons dispersing to attractors like subway locations, a more restrictive policy with respect to liquor sales is clearly indicated. We're calling on the authority to really to consider 3 things. First, that the application, as it's been submitted, not be approved because it does not, in fact, comply with the stipulations that were submitted by Community Boards 6 and 2. And with respect to the testimony of the chairs of Community Board 6 and 2, and with all due respect to that testimony, they're not in a position to substitute their judgment for the votes of their committees or their board following hearing of public testimony. And public testimony, the boards have not heard public testimony on the information that's been released since the April 10th hearing. Second, if the authority does not, at this point, reject the application as a whole, it should defer action on the late night activity at the Barclays Center clubs for the reasons that have been mentioned before. And third, with respect to service in the arena itself, the board, the authority should consider requiring stipulations of a 10 p.m. late cutoff time 1 hour before the end of an event or sales ending prior to the 3rd quarter of a basketball game. This is a policy that's consistent with a neighborhood protection plan that has been released by a number of the organizations that I have just that I had mentioned earlier in my testimony, and which has been endorsed by local elected officials, including both Councilmember James and Councilmember Levin, who testified earlier this evening, as well as Councilmember Lander and State Senator Montgomery and Assemblyman Jeffries. Finally, I'd like to mention that I have just today received a copy of a letter that was issued yesterday to Mr. Coomer and Mr. Dew from Brooklyn Event Center, LLC, with detailed information about the closing times of some of the late-night facilities in the Barclays Center. And obviously the authority has this letter as well. It details a policy of closing 1 hour following the end of a basketball game, 1 hour for the late-night clubs, and 1 hour or 2 a.m., whichever comes first, following the end of other events. I just want to remark that we've asked for a 10 p.m. cutoff time, but this letter details, in the details mentions that they don't expect patrons to stay after the end of these events very long. In fact, they don't expect to serve very much in the fourth quarter of a basketball game or an hour before the end of the event. And this is, Your Honor, all in the letter that was provided by Brooklyn Events, LLC. They expect concert events to end sometime between 11:30 and midnight, and certainly an hour before the end of that event is fairly close to the cutoff time that we've called for. So, Your Honor, I'm not in a position to explain why they need to be open until 2 a.m. in the morning. Their business plan, as expressed in this letter, doesn't seem to require it, and I'd like the authority to consider why they would be given such a late cutoff time, since they don't expect to be serving many patrons that late. Finally, I'd like to mention that there was an announcement last week that the restaurant that's referred to in their application will be a Brooklyn branch of Jay-Z's 40/40 Club. The primary mode of service in his Manhattan and Atlantic City clubs is bottle service. Now, I've heard from some sources that it is now, that the applicants have said that bottle service will not be offered in the Barclays Center, but I haven't heard them go on record tonight saying that bottle service will not be offered, and I don't see any reference to bottle service not being offered in the letter that was sent by Brooklyn Event Center, LLC yesterday. And bottle service is something that has been staunchly opposed in these neighborhoods, including by Community Board 6 and Community Board 8, because it allows, it basically puts the operator in the position of losing control over how much the customer has had to drink. And so we would very much oppose the idea of bottle service in Barclays Center, and would certainly look for the authority to stipulate that no such service take place.
Is that argument set out in your
the information, unfortunately, came out after our testimony was drafted, which is why I've read it this evening. I believe there may be some other people testifying on the subject as well.
Your Honor, it's in Community Board 8's testimony.
Okay.
We oppose bottle service.
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. Now,